So, hi all, good morning or good evening from whichever part of the world you are joining us from. So, welcome to this webinar series on getting started with SharePoint Framework. So, today we are going to discuss on how we can set up our developer environment for SPFx. So, this is where we are, how we can get started for setting up our developer environment for SPFX. So even though you are coming with your environment as Windows, Linux, Mac OS, doesn't matter. If you have any of your environment with you right now, even you can follow along with me to get your environment set up for SharePoint Framework. So before we kickstart, something about me. For those who don't know me, myself Nanddeep Nachan, and I am a Microsoft MVP for Office Apps and Services. Apart from that, I am a speaker at various events, and also I'm an author and blogger. Here are some social handles to get connected with me. And I'm an author of a book on mastering SharePoint framework, which is available on Amazon, and it is one of the bestseller book in the market as of now. So with that, let's talk about the agenda, what we are going to cover today. So firstly, we will start with what is the SharePoint framework toolchain, what is the importance of each of the component in that toolchain, and then which are the lightweight components or tool used for development of SharePoint framework. And then we will fall into how we can getting started to set up your own developer environment. And then we will quickly touch base on the flow of SharePoint framework web parts, how to create those theoretically as well as practically. And then we will build our first web part. And from there, we can take it to the next session. Okay, so uh, I assume that most of you have got your environment ready. So it may be any of the machine, including Windows, Linux, or even Mac OS. So before that, prerequisites to set up your environment is firstly a development environment which contains Office 365 or SharePoint Online tenant. Once you have the SharePoint Online setup, we will require app catalog for our deployment purpose. And then from the workstation point of view, you can either have Windows, Mac, or Linux. Any operating system will do. Since I'm very much used to with Windows, so for this demonstration purpose, I will use Windows operating system. But even if you have Mac or Linux, uh, the configuration and installation options remain most of the same. Then we will need some kind of a tool chain which is open source, so we can download those for free and install onto our machine. So that means we don't need any kind of a dedicated development environment with any specific requirement for hardware or software. And then this one will be very much simple than our classic SharePoint development. We don't have to install heavy packages. We don't have to even install Visual Studio, but we can simply install some open source toolchain and get started with our SharePoint framework development. So first thing first, how can you get your Office 365 tenant? So as many of you know that Microsoft is giving away E5 subscriptions for free just for the development purpose. So you can join that Office 365 developer program by following this link. So the link is here. Once you are there, you will be able to land up into this link. Just click join now, and from any of your Windows enabled ID, you should be able to get the Office 365 subscription for free. Again, to note, this is only for development purpose. Okay, so if you don't have the Office 365 subscription, just go to this link, create your own subscription while I cover the theory part. Okay, and if you have the Office 365 subscriptions with you, it's well and good. We can use the same for our development purpose. Okay, great. Then let's see what are the lightweight components or tools that has been used for SharePoint framework development. So we will start by comparing these tools with what we used to develop when we were onto the SharePoint on-premises. So that way the comparison will be very much easy for us, and we will be able to relate each of the component which we used to use in the server-side development with the one which we are going to use in the SharePoint framework. So the first component is hosting environment. So earlier in the SharePoint or classic SharePoint development, which was on premises, we used to host our applications onto IIS website, maybe IIS Express or even IIS website, which was running onto the Microsoft .NET platform. But with Office 365, sorry, not Office 365, but with SharePoint Framework development, right now we can use Node.js as our hosting environment. So quickly about Node.js, that it is an open source JavaScript runtime, and it is used to build and run the applications, which is equivalent to .NET. So SharePoint Framework right now supports version 8.x and 10.x version of Node.js. It doesn't support the LTS or the long-term support latest version of Node.js. So if you want to install the Node.js, probably we can install 8.x version or 10.x version. So Node.js is required for hosting our applications. The second thing is getting the packages for our development. So in the server-side development methodologies, we used to rely onto the NuGet packages, so that from Visual Studio we can download those NuGet packages and start working onto the development. So for example, if you want to have certain functionalities, then we go to the NuGet and download only that particular NuGet packages. So the same methodology applies here. In the SharePoint framework development, we have something called as NPM. So that NPM stands for Node Package Manager, which help us to install the modules and its dependencies, which is equivalent to a NuGet package. So each of this NuGet package or the NPM package can be installed globally with -g switch, or even we can install those locally. So we will see in the demo how we can install those NPM packages. So all these NPM packages gets installed under node_module folder. Okay, so we will need NPM to get all our modules and their dependencies. Okay, thirdly, we will rely onto a building mechanism. So in the earlier days of SharePoint server-side development, we used to rely on MS Build, so that it can build our code, create a package, and then we can use that package, maybe a WSP, onto our SharePoint environment. With the current situation of SharePoint framework, the same functionality can be implemented using Gulp. So the Gulp here automates the SharePoint framework development and deployment task. It helps us to bundle and minify JavaScript and CSS file, and it supports the tools to call the bundling and minification task before each build process. So what Gulp does is it compiles all of your LAS or SAS files to your CSS files, and it can also compile the TypeScript files into JavaScript files. So it is equivalent to the MS Build what we have in the Microsoft world. So in short, Gulp helps us to compile, bundle, and copy the file to the deployment folder for packaging. Okay. Then we have the language to write our code. So in the earlier days of server-side development, we used to write a code in C#. So even it could be a native C# or even it could be a managed C#. For SharePoint framework development, we will need TypeScript. So in short, TypeScript is a strongly typed language. It adds the compile time syntax and type checking for a JavaScript, which certainly help us to build applications which then can be compiled into a clean JavaScript code. Okay, and then lastly, we have something called as templates. So whenever in the past we used to create any of the project for SharePoint, from the Visual Studio we used to do something like new project, select the type of project which we want to create, and then the Visual Studio used to scaffold that particular project, and then we used to write a code inside it. So same kind of functionality is now given by Yeoman. So Yeoman is our scaffolding tool for generating SharePoint framework based solutions. So in short, Yeoman relies on to NPM and Gulp. So it is a scaffolding tool for modern web apps, and it is used as a SharePoint framework solution generator, which builds your required project structure. So Yo is the command line utility that we will use for creation of the projects. So in short, we will need minimum these 5 components to get started with SharePoint Framework development and deployment. So we will need Node.js, we will need NPM to get the modules, then we will need Gulp for automating the deployment and development task, then we will need TypeScript to write our code, and then we will need Yeoman to get our SharePoint Framework solution scaffolded. Okay, with that then let's see like what are the skills that we will need to write SharePoint Framework based code or generate SharePoint Framework based solutions. So firstly that we should have a good knowledge of JavaScript, then HTML, maybe HTML5, and then CSS. So basic knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript will help you get started with the SharePoint Framework development. Moreover, you can also consider writing your codes in TypeScript, even HTML5 syntaxes, as well as CSS3 or SCSS or less kind of an file structure to generate your CSS classes. Then we will need to have some kind of basic understanding of Node.js. We don't have to be much expert into the Node.js, but we just should understand like how we can host our applications using Node.js. And then we will need some kind of an awareness of NPM, like how we can get all of the packages which are required for the creation of SharePoint Framework solutions. And then we will need some understanding of Yeoman to see like how we can use the Yeoman to scaffold our SharePoint Framework based solutions. And then we will need some understanding of Gulp, which by which we will be able to create a task which will help us for development as well as deployment purpose. So if you want to go with some kind of an advanced scenarios for your deployment purpose, in that case you will need to have some more in-depth knowledge of Gulp. Otherwise, SharePoint Framework solution by default gives us few Gulp activities by which we will be able to build, clean, rebuild as well as deploy and serve our solutions. But if you want to go beyond that, then you will need some kind of an more in-depth knowledge of Gulp. And then lastly, we will need some awareness of Office UI Fabric. So we do have session on separately on Office UI Fabric, but just in short that it gives few controls by which we will be able to implement the UI or user interface, which is very much analogous to Office 365, so that whenever we will host our SharePoint Framework based solution or a web part or an extension into our SharePoint site, it will have the same kind of a look and feel as of Office 365, so that it will not stand out differently from what the user is saying, what the user is able to see as a entire page of Office 365. So in short, we will need some awareness of each of these skills to be succeed in the SharePoint framework development. Okay, so now that I assume you all have your development environment ready, and we can quickly retouch on what is the benefit of each of the component, and then how we can get it installed. So firstly, to start with Node.js, which is our open source JavaScript runtime, which will help us to build and run the applications. Likewise in the .NET, and the SharePoint framework supports Node.js version 8.x or 10.x. So for example, if you have your machine, you can navigate to nodejs.org. So I have one development environment here, and from here I will navigate to Node.js. So once we are to the Node.js site, here we can see the latest LTS or the long-term support version available from Node.js is 12.16, but SharePoint framework supports at least version 8.x or 10.x. So to install that particular version, we will move to other downloads, and then from here we will move to previous releases because we want to go to the release of 8.x or 10.x. So once you are here, from here you will be able to navigate to the previous releases of Node.js. So we will go to 10.x version. Okay. So based on what kind of system you have, it may be a Linux, it could be a Windows, and based on what type of installable you want to download, you can click that particular download. So right now in my case, I'm downloading the MSI, which is a 64-bit for Windows machine. So it will take some time. It is almost 19 MB of download. And once it is done, we can click that particular installable to install the Node.js onto our development machine. So, okay. But again, depending on your requirement or your environment, maybe a 32-bit or 62-bit, you can download that particular version. Even for example, you are on Linux or some other kind of machines, you can download that particular downloadable from here. Okay, I think it must have downloaded. Sometimes Chrome behaves a bit differently. So okay, I can see it is downloaded here. Node.js version 10.19 with 64-bit. So I will just double click it to run that particular installable. We will run through this setup wizard quickly to install the Node.js onto our machine. So just click next. Before you install, read through all of the licensing agreement, click I accept, move to next. And this is the default installation location where the Node.js will be installed. For example, if you have some other preferences, change the path to get it installed to some different location. But for this demonstration purpose, I will continue with the default path. Let's click next to get this installed. One more thing, that once we install this particular Node.js, uh, it will install Node.js runtime as well as npm package managers, some documentation, as well as it will add a path to our environments variable so that we can start using the Node.js. So once I click next, it should do all those things. I will have to click on install. It will run through the installation wizard to install everything here. Okay, let it install. It should not take much time because this is very light installation of Node.js. So we are just going with the default installation of Node.js. No custom selections here, just that normal plain installation. And now that we can see that the Node.js has installed successfully. So I will just click finish. The installation is done. But again, for example, okay, we can run the command node-v to verify the successful installation of Node.js. But before I do that, I want to cover few of the things like troubleshooting the Node.js. So since this was my machine which is entirely exposed to public IP addresses and internet, I was very much easily able to download the Node.js and install the Node.js onto my machine. But this won't be the scenario with you every time. So what is the first scenario? So first scenario is like even though you have installed the Node.js, most of the time you might face this kind of an issue like Node is not recognized as internal or external command. So it doesn't mean that your installation has failed, but it's just that it wasn't able to add that particular entry into your environment variable. So if in case you are facing this kind of an issue, just make sure that you have this particular Node.js entry to your environment variables. Okay, so maybe I can show you that quickly. Once you onto your environment variables, system environment variables, okay, it's here. Just go to advanced tab, environment variables, then to the path here, click edit and verify that Node.js is here. If it is not here, then your command prompt won't be able to recognize the Node.js and you will get this kind of an errors. Okay. The second and most important thing is most of the time I do get queries like we are trying to install the Node.js, but we are facing issue to connect that Node.js to the internet and download the npm packages. The reason is the firewall restriction. So for example, if your development environment is behind any kind of an corporate proxy, then in that case, you will have to configure the npm to use that particular proxy. So npm itself has got some good documentation here, which you can refer anytime. But a summary is that, for example, if you are behind a corporate proxy, in that case, you can run these two commands like npm config set proxy and your proxy name, and then npm config set https proxy with the proxy name. So this will help you to bypass the bypass your firewall using your proxy, and then from there npm is able to connect to the internet and download all the npm packages. So just keep in mind these two things if you are facing this kind of an issue, because these are very regularly faced issues. So okay, so our npm has sorry, not npm, node.js has been installed. I will quickly move to the command prompt, and here we can run node -v, and okay, now that we can see that node version 10.19.0 is installed. So this is our first step to get SharePoint Framework environment ready. Okay, next thing is node package manager. So this is just the kind of bundles of JavaScripts which are uploaded by the authors to the internet, and as and when we need to use those bundles or packages inside our SPFx solution. So this is the central location from where we can get all those bundles or packages from. So npm is a package manager for JavaScript, and from here we can install the modules and their dependencies to our SPFX solution. So again, there is one thing to note that, for example, if you want to install that particular package globally, in that case, you can use -g switch. Otherwise, if you don't specify this -g, in that case, that particular package will get installed locally in the folder from where you are invoking that particular command. And once the npm packages are downloaded, those packages will be available inside node_modules folder. Okay, so maybe for that purpose, I will open npm site. So from here, you can search for any of the package, maybe React based packages, and each of the package has got good documentation on how to install those packages. For example, you want to install this React DOM package, just click that particular package and it will instruct you how to install that particular package. Okay, and once these packages are installed with the help of switch which you have been given, like -g, in that case it will be installed globally, or otherwise it will be installed locally. So we will see the example of both global installation and local installation when we will install the package for creating SPFX solution, as well as when we will create the actual SPFX solution. Okay, so the npm is a package manager for us, which will help us to get the packages which we want for SharePoint Framework development. Next thing is Gulp. Gulp is our task and build manager, which is again equivalent to MS build, what we had in the server-side development. So it will help us to automate the SPFX development and deployment task. So what it will do is, whenever we will write our code in TypeScript as well as in SCSS style files, it will help us to minify and bundle that particular JavaScript files. So also it will help us to compile those TypeScript file to JavaScript, as well as compile the less or SAS files where we can write the structured CSS language to our normal CSS file. The reason is our browser doesn't understand TypeScript, or they doesn't understand SASS file. So our browser only understands JavaScript and CSS. So before we deploy or start using our code, we should be able to convert those TypeScript files to JavaScript and SAS file to CSS, so that browser will understand and render the content which we want to render onto our SharePoint site. Okay, so how to install this? So for that, we can go to command prompt and run this particular command, npm install -g gulp. So I will go here and we will type the command npm install -g and gulp. So -g here means that we want to install this particular gulp globally. Otherwise, if I don't specify -g, it will get installed under this particular folder itself. So once I move away from this particular folder, gulp won't be available for me. So since I want to have gulp installed Globally, I will use -g switch. Okay. Next thing, the TypeScript. So TypeScript, as I said, it is the language that we will use to write our SPFX code, which is a superset of JavaScript, which help us to write this strongly typed uh, code so that we can detect the issues, more issues at the compile time. And then using this TypeScript, we can write our code and then it can be later converted to a JavaScript code. So to install the TypeScript, we can run npm install -g TypeScript. And for example, if you already have TypeScript installed, in that case, you can update the TypeScript to the latest version using this command npm install -g TypeScript at the latest. So for this demo, I will not explicitly install TypeScript, but it will get installed when we will install the uh, Yeoman generator for our SharePoint framework. But for example, if you just want to play around with TypeScript, then you can install it explicitly. Okay. The last thing is Yeoman. So Yeoman is our scaffolding tool, which will help us to generate the solution structure for SharePoint framework. So as I said, Yeoman is relying upon npm and Gulp. So firstly, that we should install the Gulp. Then from there, we using npm, we can download the Yeoman, and using the yo command utility, we will be able to create the project. So firstly, that we will install the Yeoman. So the command for that is npm install -g to install it globally and yo. So I will go here, npm install -g yo. So this will install the Yeoman generator. So Yeoman generator is not only for SharePoint framework, but it also gives more scaffolding options to create some solutions for Office 365 as well as Teams. But for this demo, we are just going to install the generator for SharePoint framework. Okay, but again, you can explore the Yeoman generator by which you will be able to create more applications on Office 365 beyond SharePoint framework. So we have this Yeoman generator installed. The next thing is that using this Yeoman generator, we will install the generator for our SharePoint framework. So the command for that is npm install -g @microsoft / generator -SharePoint. So this will help us to install the Yeoman generator for SharePoint framework. I will just hit enter and it will install that particular generator. So until we install these two things, we won't be able to scaffold our project for SharePoint framework. So again, this is just the npm package which will get downloaded from npm site. And okay, this is very much a light package. It has got installed just in 15 or 16 seconds. So now that we have basic environment setup for our SharePoint framework, so that we can start developing our SharePoint framework solutions, and even we can deploy them. Okay, so the next thing is that how to write the code. So you can even write the code in Notepad, but since we are very much used for any kind of an IDE, so the most IDE used in these cases is Visual Studio Code. So you can download that Visual Studio Code from https://code.visualstudio.com. If you want to try out some other IDEs, then we have few other IDEs like Atom, WebStorm, Sublime, and there is also a SPFX project template available in Visual Studio 2015 and 2017. But I will encourage that you install either the Visual Studio Code, Atom, WebStorm, or Sublime. So for this demo purpose, we will go to the code.visualstudio.com and install the Visual Studio Code from here. So let me go to Visual Studio Code. So from here, you can download the stable build for Windows. This is just the downloadable. You can see it is getting downloaded. Okay. So let me click that exe. Okay. So we will have to accept the agreement in order to proceed. This is the default location where it will get installed. I will click next, And then again here, for example, if you want to create additional icons, just click this one. If you want to associate this Visual Studio Code with Open with Code kind of an action for any of the file in Windows Explorer, you can check this. If you want to associate this particular action with any of the folder or directory, you can check this. And as well as, for example, if you want to register code as an editor for supported file types, so that means whenever I will right click onto that file, it will say open in Visual Studio Code. In that case, click this one. And again, this should go into the path environment path variable, so that whenever we type code dot, it should be able to detect that Visual Studio Code is the one we want to get from. So I will select all of these options, click next. So it might take some time to get the Visual Studio Code installed, but this is very much lighter version of Visual Studio Code, because if you remember in the older days, to install the Visual Studio, we might have spent almost half an hour or 1 hour, but this one is very much lighter version. So you can see that when it is installed, I will not launch the Visual Studio Code now. Maybe keep a suspense like how it looks. I will just click finish, so that right now we also have the IDE ready by which we will be able to write our code. Okay. For example, if you don't like Visual Studio Code or you want to try something different, feel free to install any of these IDE. Okay. The next thing is optional tools. So we have all of the basic tooling explored and installed, so that we can start with the development and deployment of SharePoint framework. But for example, apart from that, for some kind of code optimizations or code reviews, you want to use any of the other tooling, then these are the tools which you can optionally install. So the first one is Fiddler, so that you can have the HTTP debugging by recording the web traffic. So to see like how the calls are going, and maybe have some code optimization done based on watching the calls being done by your solution. Second thing is again Postman plugin for Chrome, just in case you want to see what is the request and what are the response I'm getting. In that case, you can run this or install this Postman. There is again a commander for Windows. So it is kind of a console emulator. For example, if you are bored of using the normal command prompt, in that case you can use this. This is just another version by which you can run the commands like a command prompt. And lastly, but important, is the source control tool. So this Visual Studio Code has got good support for Git, so that you can install the Git to source control your code. So for we will not install the other optional tools, but we will go ahead and install Git, because it is very much important that you should always check in your code, so that it will remain safe. And when you are working in a multi-user kind of an environment, having a source code is very much important. So for that purpose, we will cover like how we can install the Git, and then how we can integrate the Git with Visual Studio Code, so that we can start using it. So for that purpose, I will again move to my machine. Okay. And we will go to Git. So from here, we will be able to download the Git. I'm downloading the latest version, which is available for Git. Okay, let it download. Okay, once it is downloaded, just click to get it installed. Even the Git is very much lighter to install. It doesn't take much of the time. So click next to proceed. This is the default location where the Git will be installed. So click next here. For example, if you want to select the additional components for your installations, you can select it from here, but it is again optional. So I will not select those. Click next. So this is the location where the folder structure under the start menu will be available for Git. So I will go with the default installation Git. So from here you can choose what is the default editor used by Git. So for example, if you want to use any of the other like Notepad++ or Visual Studio Code, you can use that. I will go ahead with the default installation. Click next, and here you can adjust your path environment. So for example, if you want to use the Git from the command line or also from the other third-party softwares, you can use this command. If you just want to use the bash only, you can use this particular option. Otherwise, you can go ahead with the other both and optional tools. So I'm going with the recommended one, the default one, Git for command line. So click next. Next thing is how are you choosing the HTTPS transport backend? So in our case, we are just going ahead with the default installation of Open SSL library so that even it can supports the HTTPS incoming repositories. And then how we want to configure the line editing conversations. So again, I will go with the one option which is available out of the box. So once it is here, again, you can configure the terminal emulator to be used with git bash. So the emulator which again I'm using is the default terminal MSSYS2. Okay. So once we select that, it will start installing the Git. So it might take some time, not that long. So once we have Git here, this is not the end of it, but we will have to configure the Git for our first use. And then we will see how we can configure this Git from Visual Studio Code so that whenever we are working on our code, we should be able to check in, check out the code as needed. Okay, so it is here. I will click next and the installation should be done. Again, one more thing is that it takes some time, even though the installation is finished, in the background, it takes still some time to recognize the Git. For example, if I exit from here and open a fresh instance of command prompt, and here if I type Git, it may or may not work. The reason is again, it is still making some entries into the environment variable. So for that, if I go to the environment variables, let us check if the entry is there or not. So in the background, it is still working on those part. Okay, so now that we have this entry here, so whenever I run Git, it should be able to recognize those. Probably I will have to open it in a fresh window. Okay, now the Git is active, so we can use this Git for our source control mechanism. So first thing is that the Git is just installed, but we should have a Git account to be used. So for that, I already have one of my Git account, which I can show you here. So this is the GitHub account, which I will use to configure the Git onto this developer machine. So first thing that we need to do is register our user, which we are going to use onto this machine for Git. So the command for this is git config -- global user.email and the email of the user which you want to use it here. So in this case, I will use my Gmail by which I have configured my Git. Okay, that's fine. So this is my global settings for the user which I'm going to use onto this machine. The next thing is that I will have to also set the name for this particular user. So instead of email, I will just say user.name and I will specify my name here. Oh, sorry. So this way I'm just setting two global variables for Git, which will help to identify Git that by which user I'm trying to connect to the Git. Okay, so I have it here. So the next thing is how can we create our own Git repository. So for that purpose, once I'm to my Git account, let me just refresh. This is a stale version. Okay, so I can click new here to create my new Git repository. So the name, maybe I will call it here as SPFx demo. So this is the Git repository that I will create, which we will use for our course here. And from here, I can optionally set the description. And the next thing is whether I want to set this repository as public or a private. So for now, I will just make it as public. Click create repository. The repository should be ready. Yeah, it is ready quickly soon. And I will copy the path to this particular Git. So this is the path which I will use to clone that particular repository onto my developer environment. So for that purpose, I will again move back here and I will say git. Oh no. Firstly, that I will have to set a directory which I want to use for my Git. So I will create one more folder here called as Git. So I will move to that folder first, cdc:/git. And once I'm here, I will use git clone and the name of that particular Git repository or URL. So okay, now that it has cloned that particular Git onto my machine. So if I move to that folder, you can see that it has already taken the name of the repository which I created, and we have a hidden Git folder here which stores all my configurations when I will do check-in and check-out to that particular Git repository. Okay, so at the moment, yes, it is an empty repository, but we will create few SPFx solutions, or rather one SPFx solutions inside this repository, and we will see like how we can check in and check out from here. Okay, so this is how we can create or install the Git and start using it as our source control. Even optionally, you can use the TFS, but Git has got good control or good integration with Visual Studio Code, so which you can leverage very easily. The next thing is Workbench. So I should cover this rather at the end, but just to give you an idea like what is a SharePoint Workbench. So once we develop the SharePoint framework solutions, we will need some kind of an environment onto which we can test out the SPFX solution. So for that purpose, we have something called as Workbench. So again, there are two types of workbenches. First one is local workbench, and second one is SharePoint hosted workbench. So the local workbench always runs on this particular URL, https localhost port 4321/10/workbench.html. Just note that this is a HTML page, not even a ASPX page. But this particular page will not have context of SharePoint. This will be just a mock page onto which you can just see how your SPFX web part is looking. The second thing is, or second aspect of this workbench is SharePoint workbench. So onto your SharePoint site, you can navigate to your SharePoint site and to the layouts 15/workbench.spx. So this is the page where you can test your SharePoint framework solution within the context of SharePoint. So you can test your code locally on a local workbench, but for example, if you have any SharePoint interactions with your code, in that case you will have to use the SharePoint workbench, which is on layout 15 workbench.spx. One more thing is that we'll have to install the trust dev certificate, which is a local SSL certificate in order to use the workbenches. So we will look at in detail once we will develop the SPFX solutions and we will try to run that particular solution. Okay, next thing is npm packages. Again, how to update the npm packages. So right now, since we have installed the npm packages at this moment, they are the fresh or the newest npm packages. But after maybe certain period of time, maybe after a month or a couple of months, those npm packages which we have installed, they will become stale and the newer version of npm packages will be available. So in that case, how you can update your npm packages. So if in case you have there is a release of new npm itself, then you can run this particular command, npm install -g npm, which will update the npm itself. And then you need to find out like which are the outdated packages you have onto your local machine. So for that purpose, you can run this command npm outdated -- global. So which will give you a summary of packages which are right now outdated onto your system. So an example here is a TypeScript is outdated on my machine, uh, which is right now with version of 2.9.2, but the latest available is 3.0.1. So for example, if I want to update TypeScript onto my machine, in that case, I can run the command npm update -g and TypeScript, the name of the package. And that way I will be able to update my package to the newer version of npm package. Okay, so this will be helpful for you once your npm packages will get outdated and you want to update them. Okay, then quickly, like, what is the flow of SharePoint Framework web part? So firstly, that we had installed the SharePoint generator for SharePoint Framework using this command npm install -g Microsoft /SharePoint generator -SharePoint, by which we will be able to create our or scaffold our first SharePoint framework project. For that, we will use this particular command yo@Microsoft /SharePoint. Once we scaffold our project using yo, we will run the, or we will use the code editor, maybe Visual Studio Code, to build out our web part. And once it is done, we will test it using a local workbench or even maybe using SharePoint hosted workbench. Once it is good for UAT or pre-production, we will ship it. So we will go for a deployment process, and then we will create a package or app out of it, and then we will install those packages onto SharePoint, so that the SPFx web part will be available on classic as well as modern SharePoint sites. If in case you're not happy with the production what you have, you can again go back, build your web part, make the changes, test it, and once you are happy, go ahead and deploy the package to your SharePoint site. So this is the overall flow of how the SharePoint framework lifecycle is. So now, in practice, how we can create our first SPFX web part. So firstly, that we will create one folder to host or have our web part solution. We will go to that particular solution. We will run this command yo@Microsoft /SharePoint, and it is going to take much more of time. So maybe it might take 5 to 7 minutes to generate that project. So feel free to have a coffee, go for a coffee break, and once you are back, you will be able to see the SPFX web part being scaffolded. And once it is done, we will run Gulp serve to serve or run that particular web part. So without any delay, I will go to this particular folder, SPFX demo. We will create one solution here, maybe hello SPFX. We will go inside this folder, and we will run the command yo@Microsoft /SharePoint, which is our Yeoman generator for SharePoint framework based solutions. So once it triggers, it will ask us few wizards. So first question is, what is the name of your solution? In this case, let it be. Then the next question, SharePoint framework is supported on 3 variants. First one is SharePoint Online, SharePoint 2016, SharePoint 2019. So the latest version of SharePoint framework is available with SharePoint Online itself. In case you go for SharePoint 2016, we have SPFX version 1.0 available. If in case you go with SharePoint 2019, we have SPFX version 1.4 available. So the latest version of SPFX, which is 1.10, is only available with SharePoint Online. So it is the one which we are going to use straight away. The next question is where you want to host, not host, but you want to create or place these files. So I will go ahead with the current folder. So this is the same questions which is being asked by Visual Studio to us in the past, and the same questions are being asked by Yeoman generator. Second thing is how do you want to deploy this solution? So for example, if I create a package out of it and I install it to app catalog, then should this be immediately available to all of the site collections inside your tenant? So in this case, I will say no. The next question is, does the SPFX solution which you are building has or need any kind of an special permissions to maybe access the web APIs or even maybe to access any of the graph APIs? So I will say no. So if you say yes, it will create something called as an isolated web part, but we will not cover that right away. The next question is, right now SharePoint Framework supports creating three type of solutions. First one is web part, which is a normal visual web part which we can see. Then we have something called as extension. So extension, again, we have more types to the extension, and then we have something called as library. But for this demo, we will go ahead with web part. So to the web part, we can specify a different name if you want, or you can go ahead with the same name, which is Hello World. So I will say Hello World. Description, maybe we will say our first SPFX web part. Okay. Oh, it's out. Oh, okay. Then the next thing is SPFX out of the box supports only two JavaScript based library and frameworks, which is React and Knockout. And for example, if you don't want to use any of it, you can go ahead with no JavaScript framework. So I will go ahead with no JavaScript framework. Again, the reason is that I don't have any intent to show you how SPFX work with React. And the second thing is whenever we create an SPFX solution with no framework, it takes some lesser time to scaffold. So at least just for these two reasons, I am keeping it very much simple. So again, this particular scaffolding will take some time, but until it does, maybe I will navigate to the folder. You can see that it has already started scaffolding our project. So we have VS Code, which is for Visual Studio Code. Then we have few configuration files here. We have the source folder here, inside which we have our actual web part, and from where we can start writing our code. Then we have a Teams folder here. If in case you want to host your SharePoint framework inside Teams as a tab, as a Teams tab in that case. And again, we have few of the configurations options like editor config. Then we have git ignore if in case you don't want few of the files to be checked into the git. And then we have a few other options like one more is Gulp file, where all of the custom Gulp task has been defined. And then we have readme.md, which is a markdown file inside which you can write the documentation about your SharePoint Framework web part. If in case someone wants to use your web part, then what your web part is all about, how you can install the web part, are there any special prerequisites to be taken care of. So all that kind of documentation go inside README. So it is a markdown file supported by most of the editors, which you can leverage. Again, you can see that the new folder has come up here, which is node_modules. So this is our local version of node_modules. So what that means is the packages downloaded to this particular folder will be only available to this particular SPFX web part. Okay, so it might take some more time to download all of the node modules and make our SPFX solution ready. Till the time I will go through the theory part, let the Yeoman scaffold the SharePoint framework project for us. So, okay, we are here already. Second thing is that once we will create our SPFX web part, the next thing is that we want to host it inside our SharePoint site. So again, how we can or where we can host this particular SPFX solution. So again, we have two options there. First one is a tenant app catalog. So if you have a SharePoint site, this is my admin center for SharePoint. Let me refresh. So here you can go to more features and click apps. So this is a place where you can click app catalog. So this is the tenant wide app catalog where you can deploy your package. So I already have deployed one package here. So the same way we can create the package for our SPFX solution, and we can simply upload that here. The second thing is this particular location will be only accessible for a global admin as well as SharePoint administrator. This cannot be used by anyone else. So if in case you want to take away this kind of a burden to site collection administrators so that they can install and deploy their web parts onto their site collections. In that case, we have something called as site collection app catalog. So what is mean by that is, okay, let me check. Okay, my SharePoint Online Management Shell is not working. Otherwise, if you have your site collection, maybe I can go here. So this is one of my site collection which I have. If you go to site contents, here you can see that I don't have any app catalog here right now. This is an app which I installed from global app catalog. But if you want to create a site collection app catalog here, in that case, you can run this particular PowerShell, add-SPO site collection app catalog and give the reference of your site. In that case, it will create a site collection app catalog for your site. Maybe let me quickly check. I think I have one app catalog created for one of my site. Just a moment, so I can get that ready quickly. At least I should have done it already, but let me check. No, not here. Site contents, no. Okay. Okay, yeah. So fortunately on this particular site, I ran this command maybe a couple of days back, and now you can see that this particular site collection has got site collection level app catalog. So here something called as apps for SharePoint. So this is the app catalog for this particular site collection. So for example, if I want to manage the apps only for this particular site collections, I can go ahead and deploy my SPFx solution inside this site collection app catalog. So in short, we have two kind of an app catalogs. One is a tenant level app catalog and the second one is site collection level app catalog. So once you create a package out of it, you can deploy it either to the tenant level app catalog so that everyone across your organization or tenant can use those. Otherwise, if you want to restrict the usage of that particular SharePoint framework solution or app to a particular site collection, in that case, you can create a site collection app catalog using this PowerShell. Unfortunately, there is no UI available by which you can create this, but using this PowerShell, a site collection administrator can create this particular app catalog, and then you will be able to upload your apps to that particular app catalog. Okay, so let me come here again. So the SPFX solution is ready now. What I can do is I can just type code dot, and this particular solution should open in Visual Studio Code. Okay, it is loading. So using code dot, you will be able to open this particular Visual Studio SPFX solution into a Visual Studio Code. So again, here we have the same kind of a structure, src web parts, and this is the actual web part file which will run as an SPFX web part. So I'm not going to make any modifications here. So what I will do is firstly that I will have to run the Gulp serve to run this particular solution. But again, before that, we will have to install a certificate here so that we can start using that certificate for our toolchain. So as I mentioned that the client-side toolchain, it uses the HTTPS endpoint. So for that purpose, we will have to install the developer certificate that comes with the SPFX toolchain. So to install that developer certificate, we can run the command gulp trust dev cert. So this particular command will install that particular certificate, and from there we will be able to use along with our toolchain. So this is only one-time process. So it is asking, do you want to install the certificate? So yes, we have to install. So this is only one-time process. Once you install it, then you don't have to do it for every year project. Okay. So the next thing is that I will do gulp serve to serve this particular project. So what gulp serve does is we want to preview this particular web part. So this command will run series of Gulp tasks that will minify and bundle the JavaScript and CSS files. It will compile all our CSS or SSS, that means syntactically awesome style sheets to CSS. And then it will also compile the TypeScript to JavaScript. So once it is done, we should be able to see our web part here. So it is still running. Maybe I will reduce the size of the window. You can see that it is right now running all those Gulp command in the background. So once it runs all the commands, we will be able to see the Workbench active, and from there we will be able to install our not install, we will be able to preview our web part here. Okay, it might be taking some more time. Maybe refresh. Okay, it is still working. Okay, so now that it is ready, I can click and click add web part, and we can see that we have our first web part here, hello world. So once I click, here is our web part. You can click this edit web part to see the property pane for your SPFX web part. So this is the default behavior of SharePoint Framework web part. We did not do any kind of customizations, but from this session, we have enabled you to use the tooling which is available for SPFX and start creating and testing your SPFX based web part. So I will press Ctrl C to terminate this job, and I will again go back to Visual Studio Code. So since we configured this particular location for Git, you can see that into the left hand side, we have this source control icon with 26 pending changes. So once I click here, it will show all of the changes that I can push to Git. So these are all stage changes which we can do. So in the message here, I can type added first web part, just some message to identify the changes for this particular code. I will click this tick icon, commit, so that I can stage all of these commits. So we click yes. Okay, so all of these changes are staged now. So in the bottom here, you can see there is one icon, maybe icon with the cloud. So once you click that, it will sync your changes to the Git. So right now it is doing so. It might take some time because this is the first check-in that we are doing. So I'll click here again. It is asking us to have the push and pull commits from origin/master. I will say OK, and it will push all of our changes to Git. So if I again move back to my Git, refresh it, it might take some time. You can see that hello SPFX, the web part which we created, is right now in the Git. So this way you can use the Git control to even check in, check out your code for SPFX. Okay. So the next thing is, for example, we saw like there are multiple versions of SPFX. So we started with SPFX version 1.0, and right now we have SPFX version of 1.10. So it might happen that few of your customers want to develop few things on SPFX 1.7.0. Others wants to create SPFX solutions out of 1.10.0. So how you can support this kind of multiple versions of SPFX? So the simple answer for this is Docker. So you can run this as SharePoint framework in a Docker container. You can use the Docker to host multiple different versions of SharePoint framework. And once you have that, you can select the right version of SharePoint framework for that particular project. So we are not going into the practical details of it, but here are some good reference materials available. I will encourage you to explore this Docker container capabilities for SharePoint framework, if in case you want to support multiple versions of SharePoint framework onto your developer environment. Okay. The last thing is the environment compatibility. So as I said, SPFX is dependent on multiple tool chains. So we have Node.js, NPM, TypeScript, and React. Just in case you are interested to know which version of SPFx dependent on which kind of Node.js or NPM or TypeScript or React, you can refer this particular sheet. So there is a good article from Hugo Bernier wherein he has specified which SPFX supports which kind of an node modules or not node modules, Node.js, NPM, TypeScript, and React. So you can see here that at least LTS version 10.x is only possible option with latest version of SharePoint framework, which is 1.10, and also it supports TypeScript 3.3 and React 16.8.5. So just in case if you are running above this version, then in that case your web part might not work correctly. So you will have to at least use this version or a version below this in order to have the correct functioning of your web part. Okay, with that then I have few references for you which will help you to get started with setting up your Office 365 environment, and then creation of your site collection app catalog, and then build your first SPFX web part. I think, yeah, that's it from me. If there are any questions, feel free to